Mrs. Wainwright, I'm going to need you to read page 4 of the survey report very carefully. That's what I said 6 weeks. Later, in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and expensive lawyer cologne, but I'm getting ahead of myself, let me take you back to the moment this suburban civil war began, because Patricia Wainwright fired the first shot without even realizing she was standing in a minefield. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a postal worker who looked almost apologetic as he handed me the thick manila envelope. I should have known something was wrong when I saw the HOA return address embossed in gold lettering, because nothing good ever comes from correspondence that tries that hard to look official. I tore open the envelope right there in my driveway, still wearing the grass-stained jeans from mowing my 3-acre property. The first page was all legal jargon and whereas clauses, but the second page hit me like a punch to the gut. According to Patricia, in her capacity as Homeowners Association president of Meadowbrook Estates, my newly constructed barn was in violation of HOA bylaws section 7.3 and sat approximately 6 feet into community-owned green space. The structure, she claimed, constituted an unlawful encroachment and must be removed within 10 business days to avoid fines of $500 per day and immediate legal action. I actually laughed out loud. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of incredulous bark that escapes when someone accuses you of something so spectacularly wrong that you can't believe they put it in writing. My barn sat 200 feet from the edge of my property line. I knew this because 3 months earlier, before I poured the first concrete footer, I hired Jameson Land Surveys to do a complete boundary assessment. I had the pins, I had the certified plat map, I had photographs of every single property marker with GPS coordinates and timestamps. I'd done everything by the book because I've lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 5 years, and I know exactly what kind of person Patricia Wainwright is. She's the kind of HOA president who measures grass height with a ruler at 6 in the morning, the kind who sends violation notices for Christmas lights left up until December 27th, the kind who once called an emergency meeting because the Johnsons painted their shutters colonial blue instead of approved colonial blue, which apparently are 2 completely different colors separated by half a shade on the Benjamin Moore paint chart. I walked into my house and spread the letter across my kitchen table, reading it 3 more times to make sure I wasn't missing something. The attached survey map was laughable, a hand-drawn sketch that looked like it had been created in Microsoft Paint by someone who'd never actually seen my property. The community green space she referenced was marked in green highlighter, a swooping blob that supposedly extended into my land. That's when I realized what this was really about. Patricia didn't care about property lines or community green space. She cared that I'd built something without asking her permission first. Never mind that my barn was entirely on my own land, or that I'd submitted all the required paperwork to the county and received proper building permits. I hadn't gone through Patricia, and in her mind, that was the real violation. I pulled out my phone and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who I'd kept on retainer specifically for moments like this. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus, I need you to look at something," I said, already scanning the letter into my phone. "Patricia Wainwright just declared war, and I don't think she knows what she's started." 2 days later, Marcus called me back with news that made my hands shake. Not from fear, but from the kind of righteous anger that comes when you discover someone has been so confidently wrong that they've put their entire kingdom at risk. "You're going to want to sit down for this," Marcus said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. I had a title company pull the historical surveys for Meadowbrook Estates going back to the original 1987 plat, that survey Patricia's citing. It was never certified. It's a preliminary sketch that was superseded by the final recorded plat, which is 12 feet different from what she's claiming. My heart started pounding. Different in which direction? In your direction, Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. According to the legal survey, your property line extends 15 feet past where the HOA thinks it does. That rose garden Patricia's so proud of, she's been planting it on your land for the last 3 years. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at my beautiful barn with its red metal roof gleaming in the afternoon sun, and beyond it to where Patricia's roses bloomed in neat, color-coordinated rows. Marcus, I said slowly, I think it's time we respond to this letter. So, Patricia, according to these certified documents, your entire rose garden has been on my property since 2022. The conference room went so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning hum through the vents. Patricia Wainwright sat at the head of the table in her usual spot, the one with the slightly taller chair that she special ordered to look more presidential. Her face had gone from confident pink to a shade of white I didn't know human skin could achieve. The 4 other board members, Janet Morrison, Bill Hendricks, Susan Mitchell, and Treasurer Tom Bradshaw, sat frozen with their meeting agendas untouched in front of them. This was supposed to be my public shaming. The meeting where Patricia forced me to admit my barn was illegally placed and begged for mercy. Instead, she'd just realized she'd invited a demolition crew to her own execution. The meeting started exactly how Patricia wanted it to. She'd sent the notice to all Meadowbrook Estates residents just 48 hours earlier, citing urgent community business regarding property violations and encroachment issues. When I walked into the community center conference room at 7 o'clock sharp, 30 neighbors were already seated in folding chairs, whispering and casting glances my way. Patricia stood at the front beside a projector screen showing her crude hand-drawn property map, wearing a navy blazer that screamed authority and a smile that screamed satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Patricia began, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "We have a serious matter to address this evening. One of our residents has constructed an unauthorized structure that encroaches on community property, and we need to discuss enforcement action." She clicked her remote, and a photo of my barn appeared on the screen. Someone had taken it from an unflattering angle that made it look closer to the property line than it actually was. "Now, I've tried to handle this matter privately," Patricia continued, lying through her perfectly whitened teeth. "But when community resources are at stake, we must act decisively." That's when I stood up, and Marcus Chen stood with me. He was wearing his courtroom suit, the charcoal one that costs more than most people's monthly mortgage payment, and he carried a leather briefcase that clicked open with the kind of authority that makes HOA presidents nervous. "Mrs. Wainwright, before we proceed, I'd like to introduce my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, and our licensed surveyor, David Jameson," I said calmly. "We have some documents that are relevant to tonight's discussion." Patricia's smile faltered. "This isn't a legal proceeding. You don't need an attorney for an HOA meeting." "Oh, I think you'll want to hear what we have to say," Marcus replied, walking to the front of the room without waiting for permission. He connected his laptop to the projector, and Patricia's amateur sketch disappeared, replaced by an official county survey map with bright boundary lines and professional stamps. This is the certified legal survey of the properties in question. Recorded with the county in 1987 and verified again last week, Marcus began. The room leaned forward collectively. "The survey Mrs. Wainwright has been citing is a preliminary sketch that was never finalized or legally recorded. The actual property boundaries are significantly different from what the HOA has been assuming for nearly 4 decades. David Jameson stepped forward, laser pointer in hand. If you'll look at the red line here, this represents the actual legal boundary of the property in question. You'll notice it extends 15 feet east of where the HOA believed it to be. I watched Patricia's eyes track the laser pointer as it moved across the screen, and I saw the exact moment she understood. Her rose garden, the one featured in last year's Meadowbrook newsletter, the one she'd entered into the county garden competition, sat squarely within that 15-foot discrepancy. Bill Hendricks made a choking sound. His pool deck, the expensive stamped concrete one he'd installed 2 summers ago, was on the western edge of his property. If the line moved 15 feet, he was in the same boat as Patricia. Susan Mitchell went pale. Her garage, the extended 2-car conversion she'd added in 2019, had its entire corner sitting in the disputed zone. "This can't be right," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its steel. "The HOA has maintained that green space for years. We have documentation. You have informal records based on an uncertified survey," Marcus said smoothly. "What you don't have is legal title to land that belongs to my client. Now, we can discuss this like reasonable neighbors, or we can discuss it in front of a judge. The choice is entirely yours." Patricia reached for her gavel, her hand shaking slightly. "I think we should adjourn and consult our own legal counsel before continuing this discussion." "Actually," I said, standing again, "I think everyone here deserves to know exactly where we stand. Marcus, show them the full boundary analysis." The next slide appeared, and 3 more properties lit up in yellow. The Chun's garden shed, the Robertsons' patio extension, a corner of the community mailbox station. Patricia gripped the edge of the table, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. This wasn't just about my barn anymore. This was about her entire presidency crumbling because she'd been too arrogant to verify the one thing that mattered most. "Mrs. Wainwright," I said quietly, "I think we need to talk about settlement terms, Your Honor. The HOA has been in continuous trespass on my client's property for 37 years, and we're prepared to demonstrate damages." Judge Rebecca Thornton looked up from the surveyor's report, and I swear I saw the hint of a smile before she composed her face back into judicial neutrality. Patricia Wainwright sat 3 rows behind her attorney, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost a fortune but couldn't hide the fact that she was sweating through her blouse. The courtroom smelled like old wood and anxiety, that particular combination of lemon polish and fear that only exists in places where people's lives change in the span of a ruling. 6 weeks ago, Patricia tried to force me to demolish my barn. Now she was watching her entire world collapse because she'd been too proud to admit she was wrong. And honestly, watching karma work in real time never gets old. The hearing had started an hour earlier with Patricia's attorney, a nervous man named Gerald Vance who kept adjusting his tie like it was strangling him. He'd filed a motion to dismiss my claim, arguing that the HOA had maintained the disputed land for decades and that somehow established their rights. It was a desperate play, and Judge Thornton saw through it immediately. "Mr. Vance, are you seriously arguing adverse possession when your client never filed the proper documentation and has only maintained decorative landscaping?" Judge Thornton asked, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she flipped through the case file. Gerald fumbled with his papers. "Your Honor, the HOA acted in good faith based on the original 1987 survey, which they believed to be accurate. The preliminary sketch." "You mean," Marcus interjected smoothly, "standing with the kind of confidence that comes from having an airtight case? The one that was never certified, never recorded with the county, and was explicitly superseded by the final plat map that same year." Judge Thornton nodded. "I've reviewed the county records, Mr. Vance. The legal boundary is crystal clear. Your client's belief, however genuine, doesn't change property law." I watched Patricia lean forward and whisper something urgent to Gerald, who shook his head slightly. He knew what I knew. They had no case. The property pins didn't lie, the historical surveys didn't lie, and most importantly, the county recorder's office didn't lie. Every structure the HOA had built or approved on that 15-foot strip of land was sitting on my property, and Patricia's attempt to bully me into tearing down my barn had opened Pandora's box. Judge Thornton removed her glasses. "I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. The property boundaries are established by the 1987 certified plat, and all subsequent surveys confirm these measurements. The defendant HOA has been in trespass, and all structures currently encroaching on the plaintiff's property must either be removed or appropriate compensation must be arranged." The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. Patricia's face went from pale to gray, and I saw Susan Mitchell, who'd been sitting in the gallery, put her hand over her mouth. Her garage, the Hendersons' pool deck. Patricia's roses, all of it technically illegal, all of it on my land. Now, Judge Thornton continued, "I understand the parties have discussed settlement options." Marcus stood again. "Yes, Your Honor, my client has prepared a reasonable compromise that protects all parties involved." He pulled out a document that we'd spent 2 weeks crafting with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of someone who could have been truly vindictive but chose not to be. The HOA may purchase perpetual easements for all affected structures at current fair market value, approximately $42,000, based on comparable land sales in the area, Marcus explained. This covers Mrs. Wainwright's garden, 3 residential structures, and the community mailbox station. Alternatively, my client is entitled to monthly rental fees calculated at commercial rates, plus back damages for the 37 years of unauthorized use. I heard Patricia make a sound like she'd been punched. $42,000 from HOA funds, funds that came from neighborhood dues, funds that she'd have to explain to every resident who'd attended that disastrous meeting 6 weeks ago. Gerald Vance cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the HOA requests time to consider these options. You have 2 weeks, Judge Thornton said. If no agreement is reached, we'll schedule a hearing on damages, and I assure you, Mr. Vance, that number will be significantly higher than $42,000. As we filed out of the courtroom, Patricia caught up to me in the marble hallway, her heels clicking with angry purpose. "You've turned the entire neighborhood against you," she hissed, trying to keep her voice low but failing. "Do you really think people will tolerate this? I'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing." I stopped and turned to face her fully. Behind her, I could see Janet Morrison, Bill Hendricks, Susan Mitchell, and Tom Bradshaw emerging from the courtroom. They'd been sitting in the back, and from the look on their faces, they'd heard everything. "Patricia," Janet said quietly, stepping forward, "we need to talk. The board took a vote this morning." Patricia spun around. "What vote? There was no scheduled meeting." "Emergency session," Bill said, and he actually looked apologetic. "We voted 4-0 to accept the settlement terms and to call for new leadership elections, effective immediately." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face completely, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost then I remembered the Sisandazist letter, the public shaming she'd planned, the smug smile she'd worn when she thought she was going to win. "You can't do this," Patricia whispered. "We just did," Tom said, holding up his phone showing the official board resolution. "The settlement payment will be posted to the community website tonight. along with a full explanation. We're accepting responsibility for the error and moving forward. I watched Patricia's eyes dart between the 4 board members, looking for an ally and finding none. She'd built her presidency on control and intimidation, and the moment that foundation cracked, there was nothing left to hold it together. She turned back to me, and I could see her trying to formulate one last threat, one final play for power. But there was nothing left to say. The judge had ruled, the board had voted, and Patricia Wainwright's reign over Meadowbrook Estates was over. "I'll expect the settlement check within 10 days," I said calmly, then walked past her toward the courthouse exit where Marcus was waiting. Behind me, I heard Janet say softly, "Patricia, we'll need your HOA files and the community center keys by Friday." The afternoon sun hit my face as I stepped outside, and my phone buzzed with a text from my contractor. "Barn inspection passed. She's beautiful. When do we start on the workshop edition?" I smiled and typed back, "Let me check my property lines first."